Welcome to the Pen Leader Podcast, where strategic leaders get straight to the topics, strengthening our awareness and sharpening our minds. The Pen Leader Podcast is produced by Roar, a production division of Mays & Associates Ltd. Find out more at www.maysassociatesltd.com. Now here is your award-winning host, Dr. Shan DeGore.
And welcome to the Pen Leader Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about measuring success and leaving legacies. And I'm excited to have with me Mr. Pete Kadens, who is a serial entrepreneur and philanthropist. Pete was the co-founder of Green Thumb Industries and served as CEO until his retirement in 2018. And during that early retirement, he sought a renewed sense of purpose and found it in philanthropy. He is now the chairman of Kadens Family Foundation and Hope Chicago, both nonprofit organizations focused on creating pathways out of poverty through education. And I know he's also working with Hope Toledo. He has a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from Bucknell, and his family originated from the Toledo, Ohio area. So I'm very excited to have him with me today, Mr. Pete Kadens. Hello, Pete.
Shanda, thank you for having me. This is awesome.
I appreciate your time. I'm going to get right into it because you are first known as a highly successful serial entrepreneur. And can you define what that serial entrepreneurship meant?
Yeah, I think it meant that I was a little bit crazy, that I was risk tolerant. So I started 6 companies, and I'm a very curious person. So, many people are in, they start couple companies, but they're in the same genre of business, healthcare, technology, whatever. I started an outsourcing company. I started a commercial solar company. I started a cannabis company. I started a funeral home company. I started an engineering company. I started a mental health company. So for me, yes, I'm repeatedly starting things because I have interesting ideas and I believe I'm well read and I'm a active learner, but also I'm just curious. And I think that unfortunately the world has so many intractable problems that we're dealing with that if you see yourself as sort of a solution-oriented person, your entrepreneurial DNA, if you have it like I do, can sort of go in a million different directions. And so I'm always starting every day. Even if it doesn't necessarily get to prime time, I feel like I'm always starting something. So that's what makes me a serial. I'm like a compulsive starter of things.
Yeah, but you do the great job of finishing that work too.
I do, and I do think that's a hallmark of a great entrepreneur. Certainly, I've had some, I've lost some battles. I usually, unfortunately, have won the war, but I've had some failures along the way. But I am really proud that of the 6 companies that I would say have made it to prime time, 5 of them are still operating today as much as 23 years later, and collectively they employ about 9,000 people. So in terms of legacy, which I know is something we're talking about today, that is a huge part of my own legacy.
Mm-hmm. I think when you talk about your journey and how you got there, it sounds like you're measuring success differently than maybe some might think. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think that as an entrepreneur and a business person, a lot of times the scorecard is wealth. Let's just be honest, right? It's like, how much money did you make? When you sold the company, how much? What's the first question a buddy is going to ask?
Right.
What'd you sell it for? And so certainly that barometer is something that's not foreign to me. I did like making money. I do like making money, and it is a scorecard for me too. However, especially over time, have really sort of diversified the rubric by which I define my success. Number one is, of course, impact. I think that's felt through a lot of different means, but I'll give you an example of impact. And sort of like, I think people say impact now, and it has become a little colloquial or even sort of a little like Pollyanna-ish.
Yes.
Everyone wants to make impact. Well, let me give you an example of what impact has meant to me and how that relates to me defining myself as successful. I've created 152 millionaires from the companies that I've started. So there were 152 people walked into a company that was conceived in my brain, and they helped me as a team member bring that idea that I conceived in my brain to fruition, to market, to scale. And they had no money before, and now they're millionaires. And I think that in some of those cases, those people created generational wealth and broke a major cycle of poverty. I can think of one woman who worked for me across 2 companies, a Latinx woman who grew up homeless at times and came to me in 2011 as a $23,000 a year office manager. And now she's a millionaire. Probably a few times over because of, she worked hard, she earned every penny. But I think that's a really important piece of my legacy and of also sort of like how I define success. Like, it's not about what you made. In part, it's also about how much you helped other people advance their own lives. And so from a business perspective, I see that as a hallmark of a great entrepreneur. And then the last one is, of course, sustainability, or the things that I created in my brain still helping people. And in most cases, in my example, they are. And that's something I'm very proud of.
I think that your point about this breaking a cycle, potentially poverty, and having the opportunity, but literally leveraging it to build on success, that's one major point. And the fact that you've got this lineup of 152 millionaires based on that they were able to have like the characteristics that can, the stick-to-itness, the get the job done, keep your head down, get the work done, but then focus on where they want to be, right? They had goals.
They had goals and aspirations too. And I think I get a lot of credit in the public domain for what happened at the companies that I started or the charities I started, frankly. But the truth is like all the execution was done by the team. And without them, I'm a nobody. And so a lot of indebtedness to my team. And frankly, none of those 152 millionaires were people who I had to give equity to. I gave out equity because I felt good about it, but also because I felt good companies are run by people who act and feel like owners. And so, I had to take a little bit out of my pocket to, help other people achieve some of their dreams. But in the end, I think it was a very symbiotic thing. Yes, in theory, I lost equity in the business because I gave some of it away. But in reality, I think what happened is by being generous, maybe in some cases even overly generous, I got the most out of those people. They act and felt like owners. And as a result, they made better decisions and helped us scale faster, and probably in the end made me and everyone else more money because of that. So I think it was a rather self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well, I know we talk about with pen leaders being sharp, strength of character, because there's a lot of character, what you just said, and then obviously you had a plan, but there's that whole demonstration that you are saying and doing at the same time. So there's a demonstration which helps build credibility and trust. They must have trusted you too.
Yeah, the managerial style that I deployed over a 20-year run as an entrepreneur was the same in every company. And I call that managerial style unwavering authenticity. You may not like what I got to say, but you're always going to know where I sit and you're always going to know where I stand. And I think because this was years or say decades of analytics that led me to finally understand and really believe that the most important thing to an employee, to a colleague, above compensation, above sort of the culture of the company, above whatever else, is transparency from leadership. They just want to know what the heck is going on. And if you don't tell them and they feel like there's information being hidden from them and they're always going to be surprised about what's behind door 3 and could I get laid off, they're never going to give you their all because they're always a little hesitant, a little nervous, a little one foot out the door just in case. And so my style was unwavering authenticity. And hey, it didn't necessarily always win me popularity contests, but I would say it won me contests relative to respect. And building a business, I think that respect thing from a leadership vantage point at least is probably the most important thing you can do is earn the respect of the people who are working with you, working alongside you, working for you. And then you'll likely have a really good company if they do respect you.
I agree with that. I think all the associates I work with, very much so. I feel the same about them. And I hope that's your best hope and dream is that they feel the same way about you. So
yes.
And now I'm going to explore a little bit with you about how you retired and you're passionate. You've really changed. You've pivoted in what you would say is measuring success and going into that leaving legacies. Can you talk about the measurement of that retirement and then provide some insights on why you did what you did at the time you did it?
So people say, you look a little young to be retired. Now, granted, I'm probably a little younger looking than I am. I'm 47, and most of my friends have, my age, have gray hair. Maybe they're not in the best shape or whatever. I'm really focused on staying young, looking young, feeling young. So, when I say retired, people are like, oh, you're too young to be retired. And I'm like, here's the thing. Retirement for me is not the way of life that many people, that maybe our father's generation thought about retirement, which would be, playing golf at the club and watching CNBC and smoking a cigar. That's not my version of retirement. I'm extremely busy. I work 60 plus hours a week. But the difference is, for me, retirement is a frame of mind. And the frame of mind is, I don't owe anyone anything. I don't got to show up anywhere. I don't have to talk to anybody. I don't have to sit on this podcast. I have no shareholders. I have no directors. The only people who own my time are my wife and our three beautiful children. And so I feel very free. I feel very liberated. I'm not a slave to money. I'm not a slave to a board or to a shareholders. I do what I want to do, and those things that I do truly and authentically fulfill me. To me, that whole mindset is about, I spend time on things that really fulfill me. To wealthy people, you get pitched all the time on investments. I don't care about making more money. I guess it's nice. I'd rather be making money than losing money, but it's not how I want to spend my time. I want to spend my time on substantive work that leaves impact in this world, an indelible mark in this world, and that says to my children who are going to grow up in a rich world, which I did not. I grew up in a middle-income household in Toledo, Ohio, as you said. So I didn't know what it was like to be rich. My kids, I didn't want them to have rich kid syndrome. Which is sort of like this notion that you don't have to work for anything. My life is set. My dad made the impact and set aside the money in the foundation, and so I can just disperse that capital. No, I have to show them that even as a retired man, that part of my legacy is I still do the work. And so, I can write the check. But anyone at Hope Toledo, Hope Chicago, these other organizations that I help or support, they will tell you, Pete does the work. Pete shows up. Pete's, speaking to, around the country to promote what we're doing. Pete's, writing op-eds. Pete's, meeting the kids. He's meeting the teachers. And that's the legacy that I want to leave for my kids, is like, you have to do the work. Even if you're rich, doing the work matters. And so anyway, that's sort of the way I'm looking at this retirement thing, is showing my kids the path to a high impact, purposeful life. I just want people to understand, on June 10th of 2018, it was the day that most entrepreneurs dream about, which was the day I took a multi-billion-dollar company that I started public. That is the biggest and best dream of most entrepreneurs. I did it. And I got to say, that day was one of the worst days of my life. At a minimum, it was one of the most juxtaposed days of my life. And the reason is because it was the moment when I realized I'd gotten to some, as an entrepreneur, you never totally summit, but I got to a summit on the near the mountaintop, and I looked down, and you know what I realized? I realized there was lots of carnage on the way on that climb. And the carnage was family and friends and loved ones and community members who, I had sort of, in the process of becoming bank account rich, I had also inadvertently become relationship poor. And that was a big part of sort of like my next phase in life, is how do I get relationship rich again?
So there's something said right there about the relationships, those that were possibly in an inner circle. You may have lost some of those individuals, it sounds like.
I definitely did. Like I said, life is not a popularity contest necessarily, at least if you intend to be, high impact and successful. But I would say most of them, there are two things. One, I hadn't sort of done anything wrong, and I hadn't slighted my, loved ones or family or friends. I just sort of been a little absent, So most of them were willing to come back and sort of give me a second chance, thankfully. The other thing is, Shandit, it is a little weird what happens when you get really rich. Like people come back to you when you're really rich, and I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying it's a reality. So I would say everyone who I really cared about is sort of, thankfully, because of my reinvestment in relationships, is back in my life.
Well, it sounds like you were able to save those relationships based on demonstration, because there's one thing to say that I'm going to do better, but you actually started to demonstrate doing better.
Every year, I take my 15 best friends from the different eras of my life. One buddy growing up in Toledo who I met when I was 2 in preschool. 6 of my fraternity brothers, 3 of my business colleagues who I've learned to love over the years, 1 of my fellows from the Aspen Institute, 4 guys who I live with now in Chicago. So like these 15 guys, And for a week, I take them somewhere in the world and I pay for everything. We have the most magical experience. I mean, we've been to the Super Bowl. We've been to the Masters. We've been to the F1 Grand Prix in Monte Carlo, Monaco. We've been to Costa Rica. And I have been blessed with good fortune and resources. And I'm going to use those resources, not just to, buy materialistic things. I can do that. And from time to time, I buy myself something nice. But for the most part, I want to buy myself experiences where I can be in community with people I love. And I'm really intentional about that.
Mm-hmm. That leads me to a very important question is, what are the top 3 pieces of advice that you would give business leaders and entrepreneurs who may be struggling with either time, resources, or even change?
Great question. I would say number 1, be as self-effacing, self-aware as you can possibly be. When you're in charge, it's really easy to sort of lie to yourself because everyone's kind of lying to you, if I'm being honest. Mm. But I think it requires a heightened degree of self-awareness to get through the peaks and the troughs. And sometimes getting through the peaks when things are going really well is hard too, believe it or not. And so that would sort of be advice number 1. Number 2, I would say put yourself in community with people who challenge you. Because as a CEO, I found that many times I'd walk in a room and the meeting didn't start till I walked into that room. And then I would sit down and sometimes my ego would take over and I would take the oxygen out of the room. But sometimes I would need to take the oxygen out of the room because everyone would look to me for an answer or response versus answering themselves. They were scared of what the boss might say. They didn't want to, conflict with what the boss was going to say. And so I would say, it's real easy to get absorbed with that nonsense that you have a monopoly on good ideas. But put yourself in a room of peers who challenge you, who can call you out, who you feel a little nervous around, a little insecure around. That is when you grow. You will not get to progress if you don't first get through pain. And there is pain when you sit down with other people who challenge you because they're going to tell you what you don't want to hear. But as a CEO, the way you become better is by, looking in the mirror, being self-aware, and then by putting yourself in vulnerable positions. And then I would say the last thing I would say, chase big dreams. I always been accused of being a dreamer. People will say I'm overly ambitious or I'm crazy or it's not going to happen. And I just have never believed them. And because I believe that anything is possible if you put your mind to it and you put an amazing team around a coalesced vision. And so I'd say don't stop believing, don't sell yourself short. And if an investor or someone is telling you to stop short of your dream, get them off the cap table, move them out of the company. You don't need that toxic negative energy. Like if you believe in something and it's going to make good impact in the world, go after it with sort of that reckless abandon that the best entrepreneurs do.
That's excellent advice. What is your most prized accomplishment? It doesn't sound like it's actually the being able to go public and.
No, definitely not. There's an obvious answer of, a wife and 3 kids and a beautiful family is a huge accomplishment, but I don't think that's what the audience is looking to hear today. But so I give you my other one, which is about 2 weeks ago, I had a birthday party, a non-eventful birthday. I guess I already spilled the beans. I'm 47 and I had a non-eventful birthday in terms of it wasn't a big year or anything. But what I decided to do earlier this year, I had 2 friends who were young who both passed away, and it made me realize a couple things. It made me realize a lot. They were but what I decided is their passings should not be self-defeating. They should be catalytic. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to spend some money, again, spend some money on experiences. I'm going to spend, a couple $100,000 on an amazing party. And I brought in Naughty by Nature and Montel Jordan and Kesha and, a bunch of other, sort of interesting musical acts. And I brought in the 3 best sumo wrestlers from Japan. And getting back to your original question of what am I most proud of? What I'm most proud of is 350 people from different eras of my life showed up, and they love me and I love them. And I am most proud of the fact of the resiliency of my relationships and the fact that I have done enough in my life to be a good enough friend that those people would show up and be in community with me for that night. And many people travel from 18 states. And to me, that is the hallmark of very successful existence. When people from many different geographies, many different ideological persuasions or sexual orientations, whatever it may be, a very diverse group of people came together, not even to celebrate me, but to be with me because they love me and I love them. And to me, that's sort of how I think about legacy and success.
Excellent. Well, my last question, because you have built in that opportunity to have those relationships as well as time to relax, although 60 hours a week It sounds like you're having fun while you're working, which is, I think, a goal for a number of people. I know that's a goal for myself, is to have fun doing the work and that I love to do. What are you reading and what are you watching?
Yeah, that's great. I do, like you, Shanta. I absolutely love what I do. I love getting up every day. I'm an optimist and an opportunist, and it's just fun. It's just fun being alive. I go to bed late, wake up early, and try and start the day with a nice workout. And but what do I read? What do I watch? I have a little fetish for news. Like I'm kind of a news junkie. I read The Atlantic, The Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, New York Times, sort of across the chasm of ideological perspectives. I read as much as I can every single day. I like to be current. I like to be wise on foreign policy. I like to be wise on domestic policy, because when you read a lot about current news, you spot trends. And I've started almost all my businesses off of spotting trends that then become themes. And usually the themes that I'm looking for are the themes where there's a massive imbalance between supply and demand. That's where I like to sort of sit between. And so a lot of it is, sort of current day-to-day reading. I also am reading a book. I read a book right now recently called Rebel Health, which is by a woman named Susanna Fox, who used to run the Department of Health and Human Services under the Obama administration. And she talks about how we need to reinvent our healthcare system because it is failing. It is in crisis. And if we don't find a way to bring in more what I would call subclinical support, amateurs, people who do not have clinical degrees as doctors or psychologists, the system will crumble and fail. And so the whole book is about a patient-led revolution in healthcare, where we advocate for one another and support one another as peers, not just relying on doctors and clinicians. That is my favorite book right now, and I'm really concerned about this impending healthcare crisis in this country. And so I'm reading a lot about that. And then what do I watch? I don't watch much, to be honest with you. I'm not a show guy. I don't if you watched Game of Thrones, and no, if you Entourage, no, I don't watch any of that stuff. I watch news and I watch sports, and I lean more heavily on sports. I usually read my news and watch my sports.
You watch your sports. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on. You've got to come on again. I hope you'll join me in a later date, as it sounds like you evolve into these other opportunities. I really appreciate you coming on today and sharing a number of thoughts, advisement, and your experience, which I know others can benefit for what that would look like.
Anytime. Thank you for having me, Shanda.
Excellent. And for our listeners, thank you so much for grabbing hold of the podcast and sharing it with others. If you have any input or thoughts, don't forget to send us a note at info@MaysAssociatesLTD.com. And of course, until next time.
The Pen Leader Podcast is hosted by Dr. Shanda Gore and brought to you by Mays & Associates LTD, creating customized solutions for growth in the areas of leadership development, strategic planning, and culture building. Find out more at www.MaysAssociatesLTD.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the Pen Leader Podcast and share with others.